Hello, everyone. I am Georgie Hansen, the CEO and founder of Mosaic Media. I'm here today with Anna. She is one of the Emergence authors, and we're just going to have a little quick chat about her chapter and her process and the journey that has been so far for Anna through the last, what is it, 9 months that we've been putting this book together. So
Okay.
welcome, Anna. Thank you for being with me today. Do you want to share a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your story in Emergence?
Yeah, sure. I am 42 years of age. I am a qualified social worker, largely working in child protection for probably, I would say, the last 15 years or so. Um, I'm a mother of two adult children, a son 23 and a daughter 18. I have seen a lot in child protection. I'm very passionate about the work that I do there and about my role as a social worker. And when my children were older, um, I started to experience some real difficulties at home, like I saw, similar to what I saw in the child protection field. There's a real area in child protection that doesn't get talked about. There's a lot of removals. When people think of child safety or they think of child protection, they think of children not being looked after and they think of them being taken away from their families. But there's actually a different sector where it is about families giving up their children. And so,
No one
um,
knows about that.
no one talks about that. And, that's largely because, it's because of a range of factors. I don't want to pass blame to, families who may be experiencing a whole range of disadvantage themselves. But there is a sector or a proportion of the children in care that are actually given up by their families. And they don't just give them up because, they're getting straight A's in school or, the vice captain or whatever. There's usually a lot of behaviors that are really challenging. And they may not be equipped to deal with them, or they just may not want to deal with them. And I started to see some of those challenging behaviors in my own children, some really, really challenging ones. I'm also married and my husband has, he has I have a stepson. But, as you know, Georgie, he passed away last October. Um, at the age of 22, he was the same age as my son, and he had struggled with drugs, alcohol, mental health, probably for 5 years since he was in grade 12. And he was kind of the first one that we kind of started to see some of those challenging behaviors with. So we, started to see some, substance use, mental health, violence, aggression, that kind of stuff. And then probably about 3 years in, my daughter, she started to experience some of that stuff as well. I could see it coming because I reached out and got,
Recognized it.
yeah, I could see it. I could see it. And I knew that it would be very, very, very hard to manage or support her during that time while I was working in the role that I was working in at child safety. So, I reached out and got some, psychology, just kind of prefacing that, I could see the wheels coming off with my daughter, and I just wanted to be able to just have that focus to help her as best I could. But, the wheels still fell off as well. So, as I talk about in the book, or in my little chapter in 2020, yeah, she went through some really, really big struggles, and that really challenged me on a personal level. Um, and largely, just the book chapter is just about me in a beautifully cathartic way, being given the opportunity to kind of wallow through, some of the mud that was around, that time. And as you know, I love the lotus analogy. So yeah, being able to wallow through some of that mud that was around and try and, be able to find some kind of semblance of, um, I don't know, I guess okayness, you know, I'm not going to say clarity or anything like that, but just to be able to sit, you know, with, okay, everything hasn't been perfect. It's still not perfect, but I'm okay. And I still feel supported and loved. And I feel like I'm okay. It's basically kind of what I feel like about the chapter.
I think it's more than that. I think it's as a social worker who has experience in this field and who then had to face it in her own life, it's you're like moving through the mud and becoming the lotus. It's that for you, but for the reader, it's also just I guess a little bit of a permission slip to know that like no matter what you do, what your background is, just always doing your best as a parent is the best you can do. And you know, there is in your chapter, there is like you can feel that it's you moving through, but it also it gives practical advice and guidance on how like how to move through. And I think when people come to find you, like this is your work, this is what you do. When people come to find you, knowing that there's uh, like you don't just have the professional accolades to deal with this, but having the personal experience and the anecdotal experience, it really it provides an extra level of safety for people to know that you've been through like similar to what they're maybe moving through. And I think so, even though for you it was this cathartic therapeutic experience, what would you say is like you would love the key takeaway or the key message for the reader to be transformed? Because that's why we write books. It's not just it is for it's for two reasons. It's for our moving through and transformation. It's also a transformation for the reader. So what would you, and you know, like this story, this book is about it's about women who have moved through the darkness to find their light. It's how they've moved through the contrasting experiences of life and found the value in it, like turning lemons into lemonade. What's your what's your key takeaway? What's your lemonade?
I think that I could name a few, but I think the one I want to share, because I think it's such a privilege given that I am a social worker and, you know, with rebels, you know, at the core, and like to see, you know, a bit of social change happen. And I think for me, it's the ability to recognize, especially when we're parenting, that even when things seem really, really out of control, whether or not you've got a newborn, a 3-year-old, or a 17-year-old that's on the brink of getting their license and voting and all that, that there's so many things that you can't control. Um, but you can control yourself and you can take a step back and you can come from a totally new perspective. And just having that onus on yourself and what you can do and not putting that pressure on your child, because essentially, you know, these are your children, you know, like you are the parent, you know, it's very, you know, and I know I've been through the trenches, you know, I've got, I think there's 10 and 11, there's 11 grandchildren. So I've supported a lot of, you know, nieces and nephews and stuff like that with their behaviors as well. And there's a saying in, I saw it in one of my old workplaces. It used to be in the kitchen room and it used to say, um, don't ask what's wrong with your child, ask what's happened. And I just love that. And I think like especially in this climate where separated families and stuff like that is commonplace, you can't always guarantee like what's happened, you know, to the child in a different location. And behaviors are, you know, and I say this like more from a clinical place now, but behaviors are just an expression of a child's emotion or something like that. You know, it's not even when they're 17. And I know that sounds really silly because sometimes you think they're just like your dog, they're doing it on purpose. They chew that shoe and stuff like that on purpose. But essentially, I don't think it is. And you know, there's some evidence around that. But yeah, just having the ability to just be able to stop and look, even if you're 100%, like even if the situation is not your fault at all, but even to the point of turning around and looking at what you can do to 100%, like just not asking the child to have any change at all, having it all on you, I think it can bring incredible results. And I think it's just hugely important. And I had to do it as well. It's just and in my own life, it has brought fantastic results and has helped cemented relationships, you know, with my family in ways that I never could. So yeah, I
I
think that.
love that. Yeah. It's kind of I've literally just finished editing my own chapter this morning. Like I wasn't even sure if I was going to get it in the book. But it has exactly the same undertone, which is becoming the author of our life, which is choosing our perspective, which is we can manifest what we want, but we can also manifest the perspective shift. So if we can't control the outcome, if we can't control the circumstances or experiences we're having, we can control our lens through which we look at them. And I think it's so funny that it's kind of the same message, is that we can't always control what happens. But when we can control how we feel about a situation, how we look at it, and that simple shift in perspective of how we view our children's behavior is like game changing and life altering. If you can shift from what the child is doing to rather than that to how they're feeling and what's happened to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's key. And I have so many examples where I had to nut down and do that. One of them was when my daughter, when my daughter went to high school, she had never had a problem with school, ever. And then within 18 months, she wasn't going to school. So she'd completely kind of disengaged with school. And that's a major burden on me. And it's a major burden that other families face. You know, like it's very difficult to maintain work while you've got this child at home, you're getting pressure from school and stuff like that. So that was a hard one, you know. But I remember reading this book called The Strength Switch. It is a parenting book. I just can't. I follow her on Instagram, but I can't remember her name off my hand. But anyway, she talks about, you know, starting to look through a lens of what's your child's strength. So at this time, well, I just wanted to yell and scream and drag my daughter to school and, you know, have her understand how much it was impacting us. Instead, I switched to this focus of, okay, let's look at her strengths. And what she was doing while she was at home, even though God, she was sleeping till God knows how long, she was researching. So I remember her downloading a free copy of Rich Dad Poor Dad, and
Oh wow.
she read that. She started she was doing some part-time work at like an Indian shop, and so I thought, oh, that's customer service. And then she was using some of her money to buy lashes like online and bring them to Australia. And she was like looking at like how to start a business, and she was teaching herself how to
Wow.
do lashes. And and I thought, oh, okay, this is like quite a businesswoman here. Like this is what I started framing it into. And you know, fast forward, you know, she's been working for Qantas since she was 17. You know, like she's a go-getter, and the role that she does in Qantas, you know, is quite full on for her age. And it doesn't surprise me now because I can see that real push that she had from such a,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, she just wanted to do her thing.
Yeah,
And
she did.
I think we're finding that a lot in this kind of um this generation of children as well. They're kind of rebelling almost against the system
Mm.
and wanting to do and showing us actually what their strengths are and what they want to do. So I think that's did she end up, you probably told me this, but did she end up finishing school, or did she stay out?
No. Well, I mean, while other people were working, were in year 12 in her grade, she was working for Qantas. And I
Wow.
actually think she's learnt far more working for their in the role that she has with them, than she would have in school. That's for sure. And the environment's completely different. You know what I mean? Like, as in even state, like, yeah, she's a Sydney girl. She's not a Queensland girl anymore.
Yeah, yeah. That's so amazing. I think that like I think even that little nugget will support so many people and parents who are out there thinking, oh my God, my child doesn't want to go to school. So thank you so much for sharing. I know we could talk for probably for hours on even just your chapter and you know the lessons that you've derived from it and what the readers will derive. Before we go, do you have like a quick um how this writing this chapter, how has that felt, or how is there one thing that you could say that it's shifted in you?
Oh wow. Um, I think for me it's that being okay with a new level of vulnerability. Like I feel like, when I talk to people like friends or just anyone in general, I don't speak to a lot of people, but when I do, it's very connected. You're getting my, you're very much a part of my time and space, and I can be quite, I wouldn't say too open, but I can be quite raw and you share with people. And I think putting it on pen and paper is just another whole level of vulnerability. I've done a lot of writing, but it's more in the academic space, so that has a lot to hide behind. But I've always been a reader, since I was very young, so writing doesn't surprise me. But yes, it's to share such vulnerable things like in such a public space is definitely a new level, but I'm okay with it. Who knows where it's going to lead? Maybe it's a one-time thing, maybe it's not. I don't know, but I definitely um have been more okay with it than I thought. That's probably largely due to your support, Georgie.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm so glad to hear you say that. And I think this is what I teach all of my authors. It is another level of vulnerability. It is like it's having a legacy that, like I've said to you all, that having something that is tangible that walks outside of your heart in a book is a whole other level. Like this is something that your grandkids are going to look back and say, oh my God, my grandma was a published author. Like, how cool is that? And so it is another level of vulnerability, but it also doesn't have to be super scary, and it doesn't have to be, like you shut down from the world after it. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. And if people want to get in touch with you, we will drop the links in the video and also on the launch page. You are starting your own business in Pink Lotus in family care. Do you want to share a little, are you ready to share a little bit about that? Or do you want people to just come find you?
Yeah, I think if people come find me, on my Instagram and emails, that's probably the best way because it's still unfolding.
Yeah,
Every month or something, there'll be a new direction. At the moment, I'm just back at uni doing some postgraduate study in child and adolescent mental health, just to kind of add like another layer of
support.
expertise to that.
Yeah,
Yeah, and that's
yeah.
I'm in the midst of that at the moment, and that's going really well, and I'm really glad that I've done that. That should be finishing up like next year. But yeah, it's a slow burn for me with Pink Lotus, but definitely if people want to follow along the journey and see where it leads, yeah, go to
Definitely.
Instagram. Yeah.
Okay, cool. We'll drop those links, and you never know. You never know who was meant to connect with you and whose lives you're meant to change. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for being one of my amazing authors, and we will see you all soon.
Thank you, Georgie.